Hello? Okay. Hello, everyone. So please, I'm presenting myself now, and I'm Jaack from Routescan. We build block explorers. And so I think I'm most of agnostic, and kind of like to talk about the future of everything, everything that is blockchain related. So I have Clayton here from head of BD from Babylon. Then I have Alisia, co-founder and CEO from Botanix Labs. Then I got Kyle Ellicott from Stacks, investor relations lead. And I've got Luke G from SatLayer, co-founder and CEO. So the first thing that comes to mind is, so now that we're here and talking about Bitcoin, so you two build both a restaking, so two of you build a restaking provider and two of you build blockchains. So why building on Bitcoin? This is like the standard question for everyone, but I believe we can just start from here.
Yeah, so I think it's important to mention that Babylon's not a restaking platform, but a staking platform. Okay. As our CTO mentioned in this previous talk, it's going to be the third native use case, that we're building at Babylon, which is staking. Okay. I think, why build on Bitcoin? I mean, it's the oldest, most decentralized network in the space, but I think its simple narrative goes beyond, just digital assets in terms of store of value as well. This being like a staking conference, the addressable market of staking Bitcoin is, 1,000x higher than, any network that launches at $1 billion valuation, which is generally like the norm these days. So do you want to integrate 1,000 different blockchains, which all require like unique piece of infrastructure, or do you want to just aggregate a bunch of Bitcoin onto a handful of finality providers on Babylon? Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, I think to piggyback off of that a little bit, when we started building Botanix Labs 2 years ago, I think the immediate insight was, why isn't more being built on Bitcoin? I mean, Bitcoin is the cryptocurrency that stood the test of time, by far the most decentralized, the most permissionless, the most secure, 100% uptime, and no other cryptocurrency in the world to this day can actually say that. Yeah. And I think that's why we need to think about building more on Bitcoin and transforming it from a store of value, which it has clearly achieved, especially with the ETFs, to a medium of exchange to a full global money. So I think we're limiting its potential massively by just thinking of it as just digital gold. It can be so much more, and I think we finally have the tools to get it there, and Bitcoin itself has the power to transform itself to so much more. We can talk about Bitcoin core development, which is something that we are very, very involved in, but we're finally seeing a cultural transformation, which also kicked off with ordinals last year, of people wanting to do more with their Bitcoin. So very, very excited about that.
And I'll just further add on, I mean, to Clayton's point around the market opportunity that exists with Bitcoin right now, today we're looking at about $280 billion of market potential that sits in front of us when it comes to building on Bitcoin. And that's current numbers as of about a week ago as well. And to Alicia's point, where we are from a actual market opportunity, moving from a store of value into a medium exchange, and also seeing the potential of decentralized applications, we went from a mere $300 million in total activity about a year ago to today seeing over 4 billion in TVL activity across the Bitcoin ecosystem. So more than 10x growth in less than a year. So when it comes to why build on Bitcoin, it is the biggest opportunity and also the most potential for anyone building. You also have 47 million customers at the drop of a hat ready to engage in some potential with Bitcoin. There's 47 million active wallets unique that have more than $1 of Bitcoin today in them as well. And also to Alicia's point, as Botanix started, she noted how they saw the opportunity with Bitcoin. I saw the same opportunity in 2021, starting to invest in this entire industry. I was one of only a few investors that was investing in applications being built on Bitcoin, starting with those that were building on Stacks, to then those that were building and pushing the industry forward, including Ordinals and many of the other networks that are here represented in Thailand today as well. And having been one of the largest investors in this space up until recently, there was no other better opportunity. There was no other applications that were pushing innovation when it came to decentralization, when it came to Web3, when it came to crypto, whatever term you want to use. There is no one else than what is happening in the Bitcoin ecosystem today.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, there's a couple of different lenses I'll share, right? One is I think from kind of the builder and founder perspective, many founders in this space, no matter if you're building EVM, Solana, right, are actually closet Bitcoin maxis, because I think for a lot of us, right, Bitcoin was how we were first introduced to the space, and to this day, as I think some of the other panelists mentioned, right, it is the oldest, most resilient, and biggest crypto, period. And so I think in some ways it's kind of nice to kind of come back home to be building on Bitcoin, especially given all the kind of, all the adoption, especially this cycle that we've seen from it. I think in addition, even if you're a Bitcoin maxi, you actually want to, for the good of Bitcoin long term, there to be more usage and more transactions, more transaction fees for Bitcoin, right? Because otherwise, with subsequent halvings, the model eventually breaks at a certain point if it's only used as digital gold. So I think that's for us, for all of us, in some ways, we're actually bringing Bitcoin to the rest of crypto, right? Bringing Bitcoin to EVM, bringing Bitcoin to kind of the alt layer 1 ecosystem, because I think it's in many ways just a very easy conversation to have with every team, and it's in terms of crypto being incentive aligned, I think everyone's incentive aligned to make have Bitcoin proliferate throughout the entire ecosystem. I think another piece for us in particular is that for SatLayer we are building on top of Babylon to really kind of enable the full eigenlayer capabilities of restaking and to be able to support any sort of arbitrary slashing conditions. So with that, we are enabling people to actually now, instead of using Ethereum for shared security, using the best asset in this space, so using Bitcoin for shared security together with Babylon.
So thank you for that, because actually, yeah, we got some discussing points, but I think there will be some interesting insights that we can build from there that are outside the standard structure of the talk. And so the first thing that comes to my mind, and this is for Alisia and Kyle first, but also feel free to join, because I'm thinking, so you, Alisia, are building a EVM equivalent layer 2 on top of Bitcoin, and Stacks is a custom VM, basically, with a custom language and so on. So us, from a block explorer side, we see EVM as being the easiest way of building a block explorer, because it's the easiest way to flexibly reuse our components as much as we can. But like specific VMs, Solana made this really, really clear. Alt VMs are really the future of ultra high throughput, because they're super efficient. And it may be the case of both, because you're building on an EVM equivalent and not just EVM based chain. So what's the vision for the both of you?
Yeah, I think the reason we started with the EVM, and that's probably the first VM we're starting with, the first of many, is because when we scanned the market a few years ago, EVM by far is the most Lindy VM in the world, right? It just has network effects, the largest dev ecosystem, the most tooling. I'm not technical, and even I can deploy smart contract on Solidity, and I think that is the true testament to the EVM. I think there's going to be a lot of VMs that come out that are optimized for throughput or really interesting use cases. So we're big fans of what's happening with SVM, MVM, Fluent Labs. I think there's going to be a lot happening in the space. But I think for us, it just made most sense as a natural starting point. And even when we're having these infra conversations, it's just so much easier being EVM and onboarding the closeted Bitcoin maxi EVM developers. So, I mean, we have a ton of teams building on us, and they're all EVM developers who are like, wow, I'm just excited. I can finally build on Bitcoin and just, use Solidity. It's just such an unlock, and also just makes it so much easier to build an ecosystem that speaks to both Ethereum users as well as Bitcoin users, which are still the two largest audiences within crypto.
Lindy on Lindy. It's good. Lindy on Lindy.
Yeah, Lindy on Lindy. Yeah, Bitcoin is the most Lindy cryptocurrency, and EVM is the most Lindy software layer. So we've actually done a lot of education for Bitcoiners to decouple Ethereum, the cryptocurrency, from EVM, the software layer, because Bitcoiners are very triggered by the word Ethereum. So we have to be like, guys, no, it's the software layer. And so when we make that clarification, they're like, okay, we're on board.
Yes.
And it's exciting to see what has happened in the EVM world today, post-ordinals, as we had seen a little bit of work early on. With Stacks, we were one of the original core layers. There were about 4 or 5 layers that launched dating all the way back to 2015. And we saw some early iterations around EVM. And to Alicia's points, the tooling wasn't there. The excitement wasn't there. The idea of building and bringing Bitcoin to Ethereum in its entire ecosystem, it just wasn't there at the scale it is today. And maybe that was the point in time which we were in. A lot of Ethereum's development hadn't yet happened, and we started to see that change around 2019. And Stacks launched in 2021 in mainnet, but also a lot of development happened from 2017 to that 2021 era. And so for us, we took a very different approach than EVM because it was a very different time. We wanted to leverage the stability and security of Bitcoin and build on Bitcoin and bring smart contracts to Bitcoin in a way that hadn't been done. And we had this vision to do that. And not only did we see it realized in 2021, but now we're seeing it even more realized at scale here in 2024. And a lot of the work and lessons learned that we and a few others went through helped to open up these doors of the entire Bitcoin ecosystem today. A lot of the tooling, a lot of the infrastructure, a lot of the rights, the wrongs, help pave the way for the EVMs, the SVMs, the MoveVMs, and so many others to improve upon that level of infrastructure and that level of tooling as well. And we've been incredible champions of all of the networks that are building on this. To Alicia's point, Ethereum and Bitcoin are the 2 biggest ecosystems. They are the 2 biggest user bases. They're the 2 biggest market caps currently. And we want to be able to service all of those. For Stacks, again, we took a very different direction and wanted to build more inherently on Bitcoin. A lot of lessons learned in doing so. One of the biggest was around block times. Because we chose the security budget to be paired with Bitcoin and have Bitcoin finality and Bitcoin read state, that meant that a Stacks block was paired with a Bitcoin block. Guess what? High frequency transactions, things like early DeFi, 10+ minute blocks, that's not sustainable. And so
Slow-fi.
Yeah, it's slow.
Exactly. It's crazy. And thanks to what the EVM world, and I'll give Botanix a lot of credit here, what they and others have been able to do helped us also improve upon our model to really reset the table and reset the bar as to what it meant to build on Bitcoin. Sorry, Alicia.
And just to that point, though, I do think that there's value in slower block times within Bitcoin, which is very counterintuitive for maybe everyone in this room. But after having spoken to thousands of Bitcoiners, they're like, yeah, I'll wait 10 blocks for my block to finalize if it's done on Bitcoin, right? So, I mean, there's a lot of meta protocols coming out in Bitcoin like OpNet, which are actually experimenting with that thesis. And there is a use case and there is a market for that, for different block times. So I think there's a lot of user segmentation analysis you can do by block time, and I still think that there's a massive market out there for slow-fi specifically.
Oh, but just, remittances, basically. Remittances is the first use case that you don't need to wait. You can wait 60 minutes or 1 hour, 2 hours. Thing is, you just need to send the money.
Well, and let's take a step back for a minute, because we talk a lot technical on stages like this, and that everything needs to be fast and everything needs to happen yesterday. But when it comes to some of the stuff that we're talking about, we put this out into the real world with more and more users. There is going to be a world of dual settlement where something settles on its main chain and then goes down and settles on a more secure network like Bitcoin. Because you want it to be secure, you want it to be stable, but in some world, you're going to want it to be high frequency, you're going to want to be able to do many things. But when it comes to the end of the day, if you want that stability and security, it's going to take a minute. And to your point, it's around remittance. There are transactions that happen in this world in everyday technology that we use that take days to settle. If you look at the traditional markets, the amount of settlement time that we had just shifted into being, 24 hours, when originally it was 3 days of settlement. That was never an issue for most people in the world. We talk about block times today being 10 minutes and that being a problem. We talk about high frequency block times as a positive and a progression. That is for us on the technical side. For the users, they're excited more and more that they're able to do what they want to do, that it's stable and secure, and that Bitcoin is leveraged in some capacity, whether it's EVM, native, or otherwise as well.
Yes. And I'm thinking, so yeah, Clayton and Luke, I'm thinking, do you have do you see like do you see yourself working with more of a EVMs or alt VMs when it comes to staking and restaking? What's the?
I mean, I don't personally have a preference. I mean, Babylon, the way it's designed right now, it can secure Cosmos chains, it can secure OP stack chains, as well as Arbitrum, Nitro, and Orbit chains. We can go beyond that in the future, as long as we devote resources to it. So, ultimately being able to leverage, the staking layer that we're building and getting additional security guarantees, as well as, additional liquidity in the form of Bitcoin, can be offered to anyone. And they can build whatever they want on top of that staking position. Obviously, like what we're doing at Babylon is we're securing other consensus networks, consensus layers. The restaking value that someone like SatLayer can provide, leveraging staked assets that were staked on Babylon first, can provide additional security guarantees and slashing guarantees.
Yeah, I think for us, I think we're kind of balancing between what can be done technically over time versus what's practical from just a kind of team and time and focus perspective, right? And so for us, we are for our V1 we are deploying as a set of smart contracts on Babylon chain, so in Cosmwasm. But the very next step for us is EVM support, right?
Okay.
With kind of a lot of the points that Alisia made in terms of that is the majority of builders in the space, that is the most mature ecosystem, right? But we are also looking at kind of alt layer 1 ecosystems, right? So like the Move ecosystem is one that we certainly are keeping a close eye on and have some conversations. But ultimately, I think the ultimate vision is to kind of, in some ways, support any sort of VM, right? Any sort of ecosystem, but practically speaking, that will be kind of take time and in phases.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking like DeFi was the home of Ethereum and EVM networks. So I'm thinking, can like you or any other provider that is working on Bitcoin come up with primitives that maybe can have sense only on Bitcoin? And does it make sense to have primitives that only make sense on Bitcoin? And what maybe there's some culture vibes and some culture shift that can like really make sense on top of Bitcoin that is not possible or that does not make sense on Ethereum. What do you think? I know it's kind of a tricky question.
I agree. But I mean, I will say, like, in terms of, maybe besides like RWAs, like unlocking Bitcoin and the value of Bitcoin for DeFi in general is the most like positive sum game I can think of right now if looking for something to build. I mean, like, there's 0.1% of Bitcoin currently, staked by Babylon. There's like 1%, in wrappers or LSTs. You're not necessarily like vampire attacking anyone else's TVL right now because there's $1 trillion of it left on the sidelines and being traded on centralized exchanges. So, in that regard, if like the ultimate goal is to get more value on decentralized rails, like Bitcoin is like the most important thing to unlock. I think at least our staking layer that we're building is very interesting in terms of unlocking that value and creating markets that may not necessarily be directly on Bitcoin because of its lack of expressivity. Is that you can lock your Bitcoin through a simple UTXO transaction on Babylon and mint an asset on top of that. And so that can go like beyond the 0.1% we have now. That can go beyond 1% that is currently in WBTC and CBBTC. And it doesn't necessarily have to be adding any like additional like risk on the slashing side or rehypothecation side, depending on who you're staking it to on Babylon as well.
Yeah, I'm going to shill Babylon a little bit. I'm a big Babylon maxi. I think Babylon is a great example of something that is only really possible on Bitcoin, right? The timestamping protocol that they've enabled, right? That is something that only really makes sense on Bitcoin. So props, obviously. But I think for Botanix, right, we have about 80 different teams building on us. And what's been really interesting, I mean, there's going to be a lot of ETH DeFi copy pasta, right? Because there's a lot of basic primitives like DEXs, stable coins, money markets, staking that you need to build out, right? For Bitcoin, for EVM. But what's been so interesting to me is speaking to builders who are unlocking use cases that I would have never thought of, right? So I'll give like 2 examples. We have one team building on us that's decentralizing mining hash rate. So solving a very specific pain point for miners, which is how centralized mining pools are. And they can only really do it with the spider chain, which is our tech, because of our decentralization mechanism. So that I thought was super cool, because I was like, okay, this is solving an actually unique pain point within Bitcoin. Another one, which I think is really, really interesting, is someone is building a decentralized Reddit on us. And it's really interesting because another property that is only unique to Bitcoin is censorship resistance. And this person who's building this decentralized Reddit, they're like, yeah, I want to express political opinions. I want to really discuss, social issues, and I can only do that on Bitcoin.
There's no flash bots that
yeah, exactly,
will
in a safe and
blocks.
secure and a private and censorship-resistant way. So I feel like that's a property of Bitcoin that we often overlook. It is censorship-resistant. It is, in a way, the most democratic cryptocurrency. So I've actually been blown away by some of the use cases people come to me with. I was like, yeah, that makes complete sense. Let's build it on Bitcoin. RWA has been also really, really interesting. I always tell people that I'm so bearish on RWA because I feel like it's been trying to happen for a decade and it really hasn't. But I think this cycle is a cycle.
This
it will
cycle
happen.
is the cycle.
And I think it'll happen on Bitcoin because it is, again, weirdly the most TradFi aligned cryptocurrency. So it has the ability to bring in that liquidity. So that's also been really interesting. I can go on, but yeah, there's a lot of really interesting use cases that our builders have unlocked that, again, make sense only on Bitcoin because of those unique properties.
I'll echo RWAs. I looked at the figures earlier this week. We've seen about a 3.5x in growth from January to today on RWAs.
I guess
which,
it's finally happening.
Yeah, so it's like slowly getting there. It may be a part of this cycle and then some, but I agree, RWAs of all sorts, not just money markets, not just tokenized bonds or commodities. There's so much potential when it comes to RWAs, even wrapping up NFTs into that conversation and unlocking NFTs, not from a PFP standpoint, but what else they could be. I think that there's so much we don't yet know will be brought to Bitcoin or that is possible. And that leads me into the second, to a point Clayton made around tokenized Bitcoin. I mean, right now, with Stacks, we have SBTC that will be coming out very, very soon in the next few weeks. But also we have 20 different assets and growing that are going after the tokenized Bitcoin market to actually make BTC usable. Again, to Alicia's point earlier, shifting from a store of value to a medium of exchange and actually having utility around it. And so you have these 20 plus core assets, including SBTC, that will allow people to take their Bitcoin from the L1 for the first time and bring that natively into a secondary layer and then into the application layer as well. That has a untapped and unknown potential that we cannot fathom yet on this stage, because you've got $1.5 trillion economy that would turn on instantly overnight. That is something that is just mind-boggling for all of us to think about its potential and what it could do and what it could mean for anyone globally as well. And when you start to bring those same assets to other networks or into staking protocols as well, it starts to open up, again, new possibilities of DeFi to RWAs to social to all of these different things that we've only dreamt about when it comes to being built around this ecosystem as well. And I think the other area that's starting to unlock something very unique is there's a ton of discussion around artificial intelligence and how does AI play a role in crypto, but more importantly, how does it play within the Bitcoin ecosystem? Is it around payments? Is it around medium of exchange? Is it around something else? I think those 3 areas, so RWAs, tokenized Bitcoin, and artificial intelligence are starting to unlock some very unique opportunities as well. Challenge it.
Isn't AI the most centralized thing in the world?
It is right now. I think that in fairness, when it comes to artificial intelligence, and I mean appropriately to challenge, I think that there's good discussion here as well, is that AI is an exciting technology, it's an exciting buzzword. What it can do right now is very limited. What it potentially could do around automation and things like agents, again, very far in the future, but I think it brings up an opportunity to start talking about use cases as well. So,
Yeah, I think so I'll come back to AI for a second, in a second, but kind of on the, I think, RWA topic, I think it's quite interesting because I think in some ways you can look at the ETFs as like RWAs, right? In some ways it's reverse where they've kind of put a traditional ETF wrapper on Bitcoin, but it's kind of a weird kind of somewhere between a beachhead and a Trojan horse because that is the way to onboard TradFi into crypto, right? And it has been incredibly successful. If you've dug into you just like read some of the articles, right? Bitcoin ETFs that were the most successful ETFs in history, full stop, right?
Yeah.
And now you have Larry Fink of BlackRock, like permabull posting
I think
Bitcoin.
this morning the Bitcoin ETFs just passed $33 billion. That's more than gold.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, exactly, right? And then you have guys like Michael Saylor and Larry Fink, just like permabull, on traditional media everywhere, espousing the benefits of Bitcoin. And you have, I think, more and more nation states now starting to, kind of disclose their Bitcoin holdings. And, I think with that is you start with the smaller countries like the Bhutans and the El Salvadors, where for them it's almost like a Hail Mary where they have not much to lose, right? Because otherwise they're a small country that, frankly, is not top of mind for most folks in the world. But for them, it's kind of like, all right, let's toss out this Hail Mary and experiment with
and
this
now it
Bitcoin
is.
thing.
Now it is on top of minds.
Exactly, right? And even for Japan, right? Like the Japanese kind of ruling party and like prime minister and cabinet, like last year kind of went full supportive of crypto and of Bitcoin. And a lot of the Japanese conglomerates are actually entering crypto in the right way because they are not just making some investments and doing nothing else. They actually have like staking businesses, right? They want to understand the entire stack. And then even the ETF issuers, as I mentioned, like Franklin Templeton is one of our investors, and we talked to a good number of the ETF players, right? And a lot of them, they have this Bitcoin ETF. They are all kind of thinking through not just Ethereum ETF, but also like a kind of a altcoin ETF. They have a lot of them have node operator validator businesses because they also want to understand the entire stack and to actually for their clients be able to speak and show that they run the entire stack, right? So I think in this way it's kind of like it's crypto is proliferating, is eating the world, and certainly eating TradFi in this world in this way. And I think staking and restaking is a kind of an easy next step because ironically in some ways I think TradFi actually can understand staking and restaking more easily than crypto natives because for them it's a lower risk of yield than the traditional kind of like delta neutral option strategies, et cetera. And for them, at the end of the day, I think the reality is people want more productivity from their assets, or the more cynical way to look at it is people are greedy, right? So now once you have Bitcoin, you want more Bitcoin in safer ways, like generating yield from staking and restaking, and then you'll kind of like dive further from there, right? I think that's one of the ways that crypto kind of got started is the incentive alignment of not just the technology, but also the value capture and the wealth creation for everybody involved.
I think also, sorry. I think also, staking, if you look at things that you can do at a qualified custodian, right, like there's not much you can do in DeFi, but pretty much every single major QC in the market now supports staking of assets. So I would assume that the majority of them would enable some sort of Bitcoin staking functionality within 2025.
I was actually going to ask you guys this question, which is, I mean, the proliferation of TradFi within Bitcoin, I think is obviously interesting, especially with the ETFs. How do you guys explain staking and restaking to TradFi that's never engaged in DeFi before?
Yeah, that's actually one of the questions. Like, how do you convince them to deposit their Bitcoin? Like.
So I mean, compared to staking Ethereum, and obviously depending on who you're talking to, the staking design that we've built is actually much easier to digest for an institution. When you're staking 32 ETH on Ethereum, you're sending it actually to another chain, which is the beacon chain, and then your key becomes its withdrawal address, which makes it seem like you don't actually have it anymore. The staking functionality that we built never leaves your wallet. It is a UTXO transaction, so that makes a lot of people a lot more comfortable. Obviously, for someone that's servicing institutions, right? Like they really can't be in the business of losing anyone's Bitcoin ever, so they are taking a little bit more time. But it is something that they've already done with much more complicated networks. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see like a much broader group of participants, primarily on the institutional side, staking Bitcoin like later next year?
Yeah, I think to that. So I think there's a couple of different types of institutions when it comes to kind of like Bitcoin, Bitcoin in particular, right? So you have kind of the traditional TradFi types, and then you also have the miners who are actually major players, and most miners have a significant amount of Bitcoin that they are holding. And so as I kind of touched on earlier, because miner profitability continues to trend downwards, miners are starting to diversify into other revenue streams, right? So some, like I think Core and Scientific is doing kind of AI, AI infrastructure, AI mining, but basically all miners at this point are looking to actually stake or looking or
reuse their GPUs in some way, like or their ASICs.
Sorry, yeah. So guys like Core are kind of diversifying their core miner business, but then for basically all miners are thinking either already or considering basically staking and restaking their Bitcoin because they have a kind of, most miners have a significant amount of Bitcoin that they've just been holding, right? And in part, some of them, they try to time the market on when to sell. Some of them, they use a portion for working capital, but generally they have a good amount sitting there. And so this is where staking becomes quite interesting because it's a separate revenue stream that helps augment their profitability, which is otherwise trending downwards.
Yeah. Do we have some, we have time for one more question? Do we have? Yes? No? We have, okay, yes. So for Alisia and Kyle, last question, and then maybe we can just get one question from the audience. Why should devs build on stacks or the Spider chain? And also, why should users bridge over and stake or restake? So this is a question for, first you, but then all of you guys. Why should they move from Aave to another Aave or to a new Aave, for example?
So I think from maybe a first principles standpoint, before moving to either our respected ecosystems or both of us in any capacity, think about your product and whether or not Bitcoin does play a role as a network or as an asset to your users, but also from a technology level. And then from a technical and a platform level, do our respected platforms and networks that we've built, do they apply to the use case that you're trying to solve? If they don't, it's probably not the area for you to build in. And I think that that's what builders need to take away is when you're looking at all of our different products, you're looking at our different networks, do what we have built. Does it serve your product? Is it going to serve your application? Yeah. And is it going to serve your user base?
Do you have a lot of users depositing Bitcoin on other networks?
Right.
So
and
maybe you need to.
There's a lot of great networks. There's a lot of great teams. There's a lot of great founders out there that offer a ton of different solutions. And you need to do your research to figure out which is best. From a stacks perspective, if you're building something around the industry of DeFi and Bitcoin DeFi or NFTs, we are the place to be. We've had a lot of experience developing our ecosystem and our community, supporting those building in DeFi for over 4 years and growing as well. But again, before you take a step into either our networks or any of the other layers, do your research, talk to us, and make sure that our network will be supportive to your application as well. And then I'll give credit on both sides. If you're looking to build natively currently on Bitcoin, we are a place Stacks would happily welcome you. If you are looking to start building on the EVM side and bring your world from Ethereum into the world of Bitcoin, there's no better than Botanix and a few others to start that journey and expand with the efforts that Alisia will note that she's doing along with the team as well. From a restaking side, it was already mentioned as to why staking and restaking is beneficial, and it's something that you should look at and should be understanding if it plays a role in your application as well, because it may not. Just because you're building in this world, you may not need a token, you may not need to restake that. Don't just build to build to build, find a use case to actually solve for, and make sure the technology under the hood is the best place for you.
I will say that completely echo all of Kyle's sentiments. What I tell folks whenever I explain Botanix, when I explain the Spider chain is, I'm tired of narratives and I'm tired of chasing the next cycle.
Yes.
Bitcoin is the narrative. It's the only thing that matters, I think, in crypto and has stood the test of time. If you want new users, if you want new liquidity, if you want new vibes, come to Bitcoin, come to the Spider chain. We're by far the most decentralized. And I think that's what matters in Bitcoin is decentralization, decentralization, decentralization. That's what differentiates us. And that's what I think is interesting. So I think if that appeals to you, I think then Botanix might be the right home.
And again, the numbers I mentioned for both of us right now, you got a more than $250 billion opportunity that sits in front of you when it comes to building applications on Bitcoin today. The current TVL between all three of us, or excuse me, all four of us that sits here on stage and those around town today, represents 4 billion, which is about 0.25% of that entire market cap. The opportunity that sits in front of you is limitless right now. Where else would you want to build if you're looking to build in a decentralized manner?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you know, the staking layer, the shared security layer, the restaking layer, the liquidity layer is all being built right now all at the same time on Bitcoin.
Oh.
And so if you look at, you know, other networks, you know, using Ethereum, for example, like staking took 5 years. Liquid staking came shortly after that. Restaking and shared security, you know, took a couple years after.
Yeah.
All of these will be in production next year. So to echo, like, you know, the oldest, like, most valuable asset, but in terms of like things that you can be building right now and not having to wait for, you know, something to happen, the time is now.
Yeah, I think just to add on to everything, couple points, right? For builders, it's still early. And then I think the other big point that we've touched on is it's a much bigger opportunity than anything else, right? And so I think I think for success in crypto, realistically, you have to either be early or be fast or be both, right? And so yes, you can build in kind of on Ethereum in the ETH ecosystem and be, you know, the N+1, like the 20th team building in whatever space you're doing, or you can come build in Bitcoin and be, you know, maybe one of 2, 3 teams doing the same thing, with the benefit of all the learnings from the Ethereum ecosystem, still being able to leverage all of that to then kind of achieve what we've done so far, which is to really speed run the history of infrastructure as it pertains to the Bitcoin ecosystem. So I think that's one reason. I think second reason is like I think folks have touched on here, right? The kind of TAM, right? The ultimate kind of market size and where it will grow is massive and is bigger than anything else in crypto by far. And then I think thirdly, for kind of us and for Babylon in particular, is if you believe in shared security and in restaking, then there is no better asset than Bitcoin to be building on.
Yes. Okay. So I guess we could get 1 or 2 questions from the audience.
So you guys have been building on the Bitcoin layer for quite some time. If you would change something in the Bitcoin layer, what you're building on, is there anything you would like to change to make your life easier? And if yes, what would it be if you would choose one thing to like add as a feature, for example, or a possibility that's not there today, that's like a thorn in your eye?
I would like people to be able to stake Bitcoin via Babylon again here soon.
I want OpCat. It's a covenant that's being discussed. It's actually written by one of my co-founders, our CTO. It's the main soft fork that's being discussed for inclusion within Bitcoin Core. I think it's quite interesting, enables a lot of use cases, and would make us faster, cheaper, and better.
I'll support both, but for me, it's not technical. It's actually mindset. That users, individuals, whoever is participating in the world of Bitcoin has the mindset shift of Bitcoin being just a store of value and that's all it ever could be, or that's all it ever would be. Instead, that there is utility, that there is much greater potential, both for the asset and the network. So for me, it's mindset.
For me, it's also not technical. I want all these things to happen faster. Because, you know, I think with things like OpCat and Covenant, the reality is, right, even if it's kind of supported today, it will take like 6 to 12 months to kind of proliferate. And, you know,
Or 6 years. We don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
Right?
6 years.
Assuming it passes first today.
Yes.
But yeah, like I don't want to wait that long, right? And I want more people to be building things faster in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I want more people to be building today.
Do we have another question?
Okay. I was wondering because, Alisia, you mentioned a lot about RWA and things like that. And we on our exchange, we did a lot of tokenization in even early 2021, end of 2021 and early 2022. I don't know if we were too early or what, because we see what
Too
was
early.
happened with a lot of projects on our side. For example, we had whiskey tokenization, some companies and so on, also from Polish politicians and so on. So I'm wondering why you think that Bitcoin and what we are doing now will change, because of course earlier most of these projects were on Ethereum.
So I used to work in finance and like private equity. And so I think one thing that I not to like harp too much about this, but one thing we really looked at was like private equity tokenization, because it is in TradFi, the highest performing asset type, and everyone was trying to tokenize private equity funds. The issue is in TradFi, and that bleeds over into DeFi as well, when you have such a high performing asset class, you don't actually need to tokenize it because it is already traditionally oversubscribed. So assets that tend to be tokenized, it's like the risk of adverse selection where it's low quality assets, which are typically tokenized, which doesn't make sense and doesn't fulfill the actual use case. I think what's happening now, or what I'm seeing, right, in real world asset tokenization, is a lot more interesting assets, right, are becoming fungible and being tokenized in a way that actually benefits retail and serves the original purpose of tokenization. So I think it's past that tipping point where now you're seeing interesting assets being tokenized. And why Bitcoin matters in this case is because Bitcoin, being a proof of work chain, and being more real worldy than other cryptocurrencies, that has a lot more, it's easier to explain to both asset issuers as well as buyers what the backing is of that specific asset class.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that's what's interesting. And once you make it tradable in a way that is fast and performant, that just unlocks a massive new market. But I think we finally, in this cycle, gone over the risk of adverse selection of the nature of tokenized assets, and that's the big unlock.
This reminds me that when everyone asks me about Bitcoin and why does the price of Bitcoin is whatever it is so much easier to them to describe than that it's backed by at least the price of electricity that the miners need to use to actually compute all the calculations that they need to find the next block and whatever, so they get the rewards. And with Ethereum and others, think that it's a technological security for the chain. It's much more abstract, and it's not really really that direct to say to others. So Bitcoin is really much simpler to describe in terms of economic value backing it. So are we okay? Okay. Thank you so much, guys. This has been a really fruitful conversation, and see you at the event.
All right, we're going into our last.